Thanks very much. They were excellent presentations. Just an open question to the panel, what they think about open bin. Obviously, companies have to decide on preferred platforms to work with. And we heard a lot about Revit today, which is fine. But to what extent do you think a national program should bestow the virtue of open bin, the ability to work within different platforms?
Well, I would have just said I'm not as expert as some of my colleagues in this, but I come back to a fundamental point I made earlier, and that is one of the challenges for an architect always is that I believe very much in we believe in collaboration. I think most of my colleagues do, but a very important issue for architects in a more open situation is that someone can't screw up what you're doing. That another professional cannot wreck a concept because they can get into something. So that is a big issue for us. And I know in the perfect ideal world of intercollaborative procedures, that there are those who argue for a more open system, but it is a fear I and my colleagues would have, that I believe fundamentally that, particularly in architect-led projects, that the architectural concept, I don't have a problem with an engineer changing the concept or persuading me to change, but a system where it can be changed without your knowledge is a dangerous system. So, I don't know.
One thing to be said about open bin by the speaking theory is it relies on people doing it in their spare time mostly to develop all these things, and what tends to happen is that you're left waiting for the tool that you want or something like that. So given what we do, we need to rely on that if we go to do something, that we need to be able to do it. While it will probably get there eventually, just at the moment it's just not quite there.
This is a question for Paul, but you seem in Scotland to have connected the dots quite well in terms of bringing the different stakeholders together. And I suppose, do you think it's the size of the country, and how would that sort of apply to Ireland? Do you feel that Scotland could possibly be more agile than the UK in terms of getting stakeholder buy-in? And would that apply to Ireland?
I think I touched on it earlier. We've benefited from the journey already gone through by the UK government, and keen to build on that sharing piece. I hope that there are synergies with our work and where we're going with Ireland, and that can be shared across the programmes. I think another big piece for me is we can put in the guidance as well, but another big piece of this is about culture or behaviours around it as well. And with all the technology that's sitting around that, it's driving that change around behaviours and that collaboration, touching on the open bin piece as well. So I think that's key.
I think, Ralph, there's one thing that the UK did. I don't know if Scotland did it, but the appointment of a construction czar in about 2009, Paul Morel, was a key factor in making change in the UK. He had the ear of ministers in both Labour and Conservative administrations, and we probably need something like that in this country to unlock barriers and vested interest.
Cathy Malloy, Austin, Reddy and Company, Quantity Surveyors. Communication, collaboration and visualisation has been talked a lot by the speakers today. One thing that hasn't been mentioned is cost control and the production of quick cost planning and tender documentation. What is the panel's experience of quantity surveyors and cost control to date?
I suppose from my point of view, we've used the QS to do. I'm actually married to QS, interestingly. So we're very sorry for my troubles now.
Sorry about that.
You're kissing the lifestyle I'm accustomed to. What I find is that from my experience with dealing with other consultants is that QSs and M&E consultants have not bought into it properly yet. And I think all of the design team have to buy into it, and then I think the cost control will come very easily. Like things we talked about, schedules, you produce a schedule, the information's there. It's very easy to make it happen if people actually understand and interrogate the model and know what they want out of it. You write the script, you write the schedule, it makes it much easier. And it should be happening, but for me, it's not, unfortunately. I think we all have to get together. I said, like, everybody in the room here is here for a job. Everybody should earn a living. This makes it much easier to earn a living. And the product that's produced at the end is much better. And you can do cost control all the way through the whole process. That would be my view on it.
As a QS by profession, I think for me, the big opportunity around then is a more proactive cost management approach. I think the information will be there earlier to actually inform designs more effectively and add value earlier, and avoid, in some circumstances, just providing the answer at the end when sometimes it's too late. So I think that's a big opportunity.
Yeah, because it's hard to understand why QSs aren't getting involved, or why clients or designers aren't pushing quantity surveyors to get involved, because there is huge benefits. But it's hard to understand why not.
The UK model is requiring that QS are involved, and the project that Will spoke about in UCD, the quantity surveyor there as part of the team is actually working, is doing bills of quantities from the model. My own belief is that there's huge potential there, but I think, to trigger what both speakers said, it really, to reach its full potential, it needs buy-in from the whole team. And the big question mark is over the 35% or so that's spent on M&E services. I mean, that is a black hole that is not interrogated to the same degree as, you know, the finishes, the materials, the structure. And I think that's a huge opportunity for all of us, our clients, contractors. In fact, there are one or two M&E engineers here, and it will be a message to them. The services engineers who embrace BIM have a great future, and they can contribute hugely to the industry and to producing better buildings.
Yeah, I think I would echo what Tony's saying. We're finding that we're constantly asking clients to, whether writing briefs, to appoint other consultants to ensure that they're also designing in 3D, or else we're kind of on our own. And we find in some projects we're totally on our own, and in other projects we're really battling both with structural engineers and M&E engineers to get them to buy into designing in 3D. And the QSing is the next step, and we haven't got there. But we're actively now seeking consultants who are designing 3D, and eventually, if we don't keep up, in our projects anyway, and I'm sure Tony and other practices who are spending a lot of time and effort in developing the whole 3D process, everybody needs to buy in. That's where the efficiencies are. And I think just one comment is it's probably down to process. And I was asking some engineers why they're not as keen on this process as we are, because it's not driven from clients down and or from central government down, so there's no need yet. And say for instance, to take M&E, and I don't mean to explain the business now, but there's with M&E design, it seems to be that it's fairly schematic in terms of the overall design, and then it's handed to CAD technicians who don't have to think, they just have to draw, and then out comes the design, the specs, and sufficient to explain what's going on. The problem in 3D is it's not all up front, and I think we talked about this with Paul earlier about the fees are now up front. You actually have to design, and also you can't just have some CAD technician who doesn't understand designing your, say, mechanical ducting system and or any other system. So it's maybe it's a bigger shift whilst architects or project architects are designing as they go. But we find with engineers, they're not always designers, so not everybody has to design. So they have to be actually quite good quality engineers, and that's just my own reading of it and talking to various parties. So there's a bit of learning for everybody, I think. And so can I ask Tony just one question? So you're obviously operating very well in both jurisdictions in terms of the UK and here. And do you find attitudes are different, just generally amongst clients, amongst consultants? Do you find a marked difference?
No, in fact, we see almost a replication of attitudes, and all the issues are the same. I think it is helpful to have that the government has actually embraced it, and I think it's going to happen here inevitably. But I think it might need an enabler to make it happen. I know my sense, Dan, is the challenges are exactly the same, and the barriers are the same. It's remarkable, actually.
I think it's exactly the same. Like M&E and quantitative surveyors are kind of behind the pace still. I think the interesting thing in London is like we've had 2 big client meetings in the last for private clients, and they're coming looking for BIM now. They're actually coming and they know what they want.
They know what they want.
Like we've one client come in with a USB stick that had all their families for standard doors and stuff they use, and they're just handing it over. Like
There's one story I'll tell you, and this sounds like we're ganging up on M&E engineers, but it's quite the opposite. It's showing the opportunity. I happened to meet an M&E engineer on the Heathrow Express. It'll be some time ago, and they were bragging about the fact that they got a Malaysian group to do a model for 10 grand. And then they realized they were talking about a project that we were involved in. It wasn't our project, but it was a related project. But in fact, it showed an attitude that, in fact, subsequently we heard that they got into dreadful trouble on the project. But that mindset of it's a drafting exercise. Producing a Revit model is not a drafting exercise, it's a design exercise. And if you approach it the way particularly M&E engineers approach AutoCAD, then you will have big problems. So it's a challenge.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree totally with that. Yeah.
One little thing that I've noticed, sorry, go back to one of the questions earlier on, and QS question as well, is that when you do design in the 3D, you upfront design. That when you get the site, like I noticed that our involvement in site is substantially less because decisions are made, and that has a cost benefit because contractors are not pulling their hair out and this isn't working and that isn't working. You don't get everything 100%, but you get 90% of it correct. So it's just upfront design, and it means that you can think rationally, calculatedly about what you want and why it will work, and then that can be costed as well, and it has a big massive cost on saving then down the line as well.
And just building on that as well, the other advantage is with the models, you've got more informed stakeholders through your stakeholder engagement, and it just mitigates that change post-contract as well. People understand the product, the outcome better, so that all helps with cost as well.
The other area which Dan touched on is FM. I mean, the real long-term benefit in BIM is going to be when you go to level 5, 6, 7, where you actually input at the end of the project all of the elements, so that in 5 years' time you can point a nap at that light fitting and actually say it needs to be replaced, and by the way, the supplier is X. I mean, that's a level of service of the construction industry to the FM industry which has huge potential. And I think it will be in huge demand. Once people begin to produce models, the next logical step is that information, instead of someone going looking for the manual, which is inevitably in a cupboard somewhere which people can't find, it's there in an app.
Sorry, Jim O'Connor here from GMIT Galway. Just to follow up on Cathy's point there regarding the QS, we have, don't mind saying this, but we have very, very poor buy-in from QSs in the academic sector in terms of BIM. But out of frustration, what we have done in GMIT is we've introduced QS software to the Architecture Technology program. And it's another part of this disruptive technology. You know, I can see we've had amazing outcomes from that there, in the sense that we've discovered that introducing the QS software to architecture technologists brings home very, very forcefully to technologists the need for accurate modelling. So certainly in the future we're going to embed this QS software into our architecture technology program, and our technologists will be able to use it, because we don't see the buy-in at all from the architecture, and I think it's going to I think it's going to be very, very effective because the technologists are involved in all sorts of like energy analysis and so on and so forth. So I think, it's just going to add to their skill set, and it's one way to get around it. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I think a small point in that, what I can say, and probably Will, you have seen it as well, and Ralph and anybody else has been at it since 2000 and odd, whatever. Like the software and the add-ons to software is it's exceptional. Like if there's a market for a QS package that's simple, that's easily understood, it'll be invented because there's a market to make it, to sell it. And I think of that, when you buy in, you can see it, like the 3D visualization, the information that attaches to the software is it's from where it started, it's incredible. So if there's a requirement for it, it'll happen pretty easy and make it more user interface.
There's a question at the back there.
Hi, question for the panel. Perhaps Tony for this one. Damien Duffy, NDFA. I'm just wondering, a lot of this BIM world we're trying to build, or the work we can produce through it, we're talking about culture and collaborate and high color. I'm just wondering, are we seeing any changes in the industry or how it's structured? We're set up very much by discipline. We talked about sort of coming from, trying to think in 3D, work in 2D and get it back built in 3D in reality. In terms of all these interfaces and breakdowns in terms of getting to this end product, are we seeing a reshaping of the industry? Architects working with engineers and M&E engineers and finishes to get this more whole project life, whole view put back together in a more workable culture. It's a very fragmented industry.
There's no doubt our experience would be that we're seeing contractors now responding very positively to the opportunity that BIM creates for them. And you're seeing, I think, initially a gap in the market where the larger contractors are embracing it wholeheartedly. But you're also seeing some small to medium contractors who are, Gary said, embracing it. And they're moving ahead. So I think it'll bring the whole industry with it. And it will involve change.
So noticeably, you can see that some of the early benefactors are contracting organisations. It's a real bottom line benefit when they can own true information and work with it. Does the design team need to consolidate more? Multidisciplinary, because you have a lot of different cultures and different approaches, and they connect in different ways to the supply chain.
I can only answer this by saying I worked as a young architect for a multidisciplinary practice in the United States, and when I came back to Ireland, I worked for them. It's interesting, the practices in Ireland never survived. So I think our economy is a small economy, and it's difficult for a multidisciplinary practice to survive in that economy. However, I think the attitudes and the culture of collaboration in a multidisciplinary practice may need to find better route in the industry. That's just a personal view.
Yeah, I think just in terms of collaboration, what we're trying to do is to get ultimately the 3D process results in 2D drawings for contractors to build, but we're trying to get as much buy-in with contractors as possible. So what we do is we plaster the site huts with images from the 3D models. And we've worked in some larger scale practices where if you get buy-in from everybody involved in the design process early, if you design good buildings at the start, then you're now working for 2 or 3 years on a nice building, everybody contributes, everybody buys in, contractors right through to the guy installing rainwater pipes or the tiling. If you get everyone to buy into the design, you get a much better product. So what we tend to do is to spend a bit of time ourselves doing displays for all the contractors, every subcontractor on the site, and we offer to do whatever the contractor wants to explain to subcontractors where we're trying to get to. And we just find that that's enormous buy-in in terms of collaboration, and I think the 3D tool allows us to do that. So that's kind of, in terms of early contractor involvement, in terms of collaboration and all point in one direction. It just assists in that mindset on a site rather than an adversarial kind of stance. So it's just our own experience.
Just a question for Paul, and just to
to extend the conversation around culture and the move from, I guess, what's been quite an adversarial industry and an industry that's been forced to silo, I guess because of that, and to be quite defensive, to a culture that we recognise as being the right environment to really get the benefits of BIM. So the UK government would recognise that journey, as indeed we do. In terms of understanding that the need for a cultural shift, and I think that the role of BIM and more information and sharing is important. But is there any research that you're familiar with in terms of how we might organise ourselves to really address the cultural shift, or perhaps what areas we might be the lowest hanging fruit, if you like, to set the example?
I'd like to make just one comment on it, John. I would have said there is a difference between Britain and Ireland in terms of culture, and I should have probably said this at Dan earlier. England particularly is incredibly the adversarial building culture, and has been for 40 or more years. I don't think that exists in Ireland. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I would say in the Irish building industry there's a can-do culture, and it's probably more influenced by American, by the interface for 50 years now with American companies, which is a big part of most contractors' work and most consultants' work. So I would just say that it probably is the reason why you're getting that change happening with less protectionism. That's a personal view.
I would say as part of this cultural change and driving behaviours, I think we have to answer, wherever you are in the supply chain, what's in it for me? And on a public sector side, it's cost certainty driving value. For QS, as we talked about, is it competitive advantage in terms of reducing costs that are incurred with billing, whatever it may be. So, excuse me, I think answering or shaping that question would be a big step in the right direction to prompt that cultural change.
Thank you.
Okay, there's a question here at the front. Might just take one more question and then wrap up. The joy of the construction industry being back is we're all quite busy. So
okay, just very briefly, it's just really challenges for BIM is just what I just wanted to look at, just to see how you're actually going to deal with these. I'm working on the client side of a project, and one of the things that I see is that there is quite a fragmented approach across the way in which different people approach BIM from a professional perspective. The very first one is in trying to get the client to understand what they're going to get. And one of the things that we find with a lot of people who come to us, they come to us with 2D drawings and then they say, we will give you a visualization of this. And we're quite far into the process before we actually get the visualization. And that can be quite difficult for people who don't understand 2D drawings. One of the things that actually struck me, I was watching the television last Sunday night and I saw Dermot Bannon doing Room to Improve. I never actually watched the programme before, but I was actually amazed by the fact that the first thing he did was he created a 3D model for people who knew nothing about building, and immediately they understood what they were going to get. So immediately he got buy-in there. There's a big challenge to people like yourselves to be able to produce very early in the process a visualization of what the client is going to get. That's the first challenge. The second one is, when we get drawings back from various different professions, they're generally not coordinated. I had a situation last week where I got landscape drawings, civil engineering drawings, MEP drawings, and architectural drawings. And they weren't coordinated at all. When I questioned the people involved, they said, I said, why are they not coordinated? They said, oh, well, they're all working on their own models and then their own drawings, and then we'll put them into the model. Now that's really is the horse and the cart not being coordinated in the right way. It's got to be the model and then pull the drawings from the model. That's not happening yet in most cases. So that's a jump that has to be done. And the next one that has to happen, and this is a very difficult one for clients, is we've got to get a way of finding how do we get the information out of the model into the FM packages that we're using now. I had a simple one there during the week. In DIT, we use AssetWare to track all of our assets. And I sent a simple email to AssetWare and said, are you COBE compliant? And they said, no, we're not. but then nobody else is either. So we have an ability to get all this information, but we're really struggling to find out how the hell do we use it.
I'll take the last point. The exact conversations we're having right now with health boards around having the end in sight at the start, and that asset piece, and some of the complexities about doing all the good work up front and having that information, and then, as you say, how it's used effectively in the operational phase. So I don't disagree with any of your challenges that you raised there. I think early engagement and putting the correct skills and resource in place. Even at day one, we're having conversations between the facilities managers and the procurement team within a health board, and even that's unlocking a lot of positive outcomes in terms of what that looks like going forward.
Right. Come in on the visualization bit, because we're working in Revit now, mostly around, we're nearly there. We can produce these visualizations very quickly. So because the model's there, they can be rendered out very quickly. And there are other programs out there that you can very quickly do walkthroughs and stuff so you get a very good sense of what it is. On the coordination side of it, a big part of missing, it's going back to one of Paul's early points, is this whole management side of it. It is a process, and if you let people go off, they'll stay in their silos. So someone actually needs to manage them. Someone needs to bang heads together and actually make it happen, more or less. And unless that happens, it's just going to keep continuing where people are doing their own thing, because everyone works to tight deadlines, and unless it's forced, it's just not going to happen.
Hi there. I think I've got a question for the panel, but maybe a little bit for the room as well. So I'm new to the AEC industry, so I'm learning as I go along, okay? So first of all, if you're an architectural practice or an engineering practice, could you just put up your hand, and just so we can actually see how many architects and engineers are here today? Okay, and if you don't have a formal could you keep your hands up for a second? And if you don't have a formal collaboration strategy, can you drop your hand? So I'd say most people don't have a formal collaboration strategy. Is that something that you're seeing in the industry? Because there's all sorts of tools available now in terms of managing collaboration across the entire life cycle. We've just heard about the difficulty that this gentleman was having, multiple versions of files and formats. So, I mean, we're hearing collaboration, and the buzzword is collaboration. We're not really seeing it take effect yet.
Agreed, and it's an easy word to say, and those challenges that have been raised there are born out of the fact that that isn't happening. So there are varying levels of how true collaboration is happening across projects, but BIM in a number of ways opens the door to facilitate that in a better way. So yeah, there's big challenges out there around that.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to ignore the collaboration. It's very easy to ignore change is good. I find the same as well. I think, I put down a simple analogy. I don't know what we pay, 15 cents on a plastic bag. Many people get a plastic bag now. It needs to be implemented. You need to be told you have to do it. That's part of the regulations. It is the law. And once that happens, then people can't ignore it, and they will participate. Like on our library project, we were the only one that had the BIM organisation to make it the building that we wanted to make it. We modelled everything. We modelled the structure. We modelled the M&E. We took the responsibility to make sure that there wasn't clashes. We didn't take responsibility for the design of it, but we took responsibility for the clash ideas to get the building the way we wanted to get it. And I think that everybody needs to collaborate. So let's introduce the 15 cents tax or wherever it has to be, and I think it will happen.
Sorry, just one last point on that. It's down to contract. It's that simple. The software is there, they're just a means to an end. It's a contracting agent, and it's about making people follow through on their contract. Right now, the Irish contracts don't align with collaboration. Plain and simple. That's the end of the story. Until such a time as they do, we might just continue on as we are, disparate, broken, effectively costing ourselves 25% on every single construction project, letting our clients down, letting our industry down. So it's time we woke up, dealt with it, accepted the ways that we did it, are old-fashioned. We need to digitise ourselves, become leaner. This is about lean. You know, the LCI, how many people in this room attend those meetings as well, in construction? If you don't, you should. But it is about contract realignments, fundamentally, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you very much. So I just wrap up if I can now. We're doing okay for time. As well as just to thank the panel, Paul, Tony who's gone.